Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Dobocaro, and welcome to this edition of Politics in Perspective. It's been a busy week. Of course, when isn't it a busy week? It's American politics, but the Iran deal took front and center, so we'll talk about that. But first, I want to thank Ex America News for carrying us along with AUN TV and WorldviewTube.com. Of course, we're on YouTube and Rumble. And you can go to politicalvanguard.com and get the whole collection of shows. And you see my Substack there. And we're going to talk about one of my Substack articles right away. So let's just get right to it. The Iran deal. Well, is there a deal? Isn't there? Is there not a deal? With Iran, it's always tricky is not the right word. Slippery. Perhaps. So let's talk about this a little bit because President Trump is taking heat from a lot of different directions on whether or not there's actually a deal, and if there is a deal, whether the deal's any good at all. Well, let's talk about it. But first, as I mentioned, this is my Substack article. And below there, you can see here are some bottom line facts. And the bottom line facts can never be forgotten when it comes to Iran. Number one, you can't trust the Iranian dictators. You can't. They only know force, and in some respects, they only know death. So start with that assumption you can't trust them, which is why the deal Obama made to fund them and to hope they don't do anything bad, and which had an end date on it, was never going to work. What did they do when they got the money? What did they do when they got the money from Biden? We all know they used it for evil purposes. Hamas is evil. Hezbollah is evil. Their nuclear ambitions, evil. They even used the money from Obama to fight conventional war back in those days. So, bottom line, can't be trusted. Bottom line, if you give them money, meaning the unrestricted money that isn't performance-based, and you're not able to verify it, they'll probably do evil things. So why is this any different, especially since there's a money component to this particular deal, if there is a deal, and if it goes forward? Well, you're starting at a way different starting point. With Obama and Biden, the starting point was the Middle East was afraid, other countries were afraid of Iran, and Iran was ascendant in certain ways. And by this, I mean the ambitions of the regime. So what's the difference now? Well, of course, they were bombed for months on end. They don't have what they had before. Many thousands of those in the hierarchy of power were killed. Buildings were destroyed, lots of them, including headquarters. And so this week I pointed out, as you can see here from these two Facebook posts, that those who are saying this is simply a deal that gives them money ignores the fact, or that it's a deal that gives them more than they had before, ignores the fact that they were bombed for 2 months. I even watched someone on TV say, well, this is better than they had before. Okay, well, maybe your house should be bombed for 2 months and sanctions and everything else, and then you tell us you're in better shape. Now, here's the important bottom line fact. America was unwilling to go to war and kill enough of the hierarchy, including probably 30, 40,000 of the Iranian Guard, and go into the country and do regime change. America's not willing to do that. That would have been considered a forever war. So what is your choice? give them money where they do evil things right away with the money, or bomb them, set them back many years with infrastructure, and I mean the power structure, the Iranian Guard and others, take away a significant part of their infrastructure, take away launchers and the like, set them back, knowing that you have the power to do it again. And that's such an important thing here that also the left forgets, and the Republicans who are arguing with this moment in time. None of those people, by the way, were willing to go in and occupy Iran or do a year's worth of bombing and killing. None of them. They wanted the status quo. They didn't want any war whatsoever. And Iran, as we now know, had many more munitions than they believed. So this is some bottom line analysis. Either you give them money and let them prosper, or you, every now and then, bomb them backwards and build a coalition around them. Also, a big difference between Obama and today is this coalition around Iran. In this war, the UAE worked with Israel. They took defensive weapons from Israel, and the UAE directly bombed Iran. That had never happened before because the world's different now. The weakened Iran, the weakened Hamas, the weakened Hezbollah, all of which never occurred under a Democrat. Keep in mind, the Democrats haven't had a strong foreign policy president since Truman, maybe JFK, but Truman. The map of the Middle East, which includes now the Abraham Accords and alliances that didn't exist, they don't fear Iran to the same degree that they did before. Now, it is true that they were worried about their oil infrastructure, but they've also changed their mind and are now working on more pipelines and more ways to get around the Straits of Hormuz. So I'm not here saying to anyone, trust Iran. I'm being very realistic. Trump is worried about the midterms. And so I think this was a midterm deal, if you will, with a country you can't trust, with the United States unwilling to go through a sustained war against this country that kills tens of thousands, God knows how many thousands of their people. Now, what if Iran doesn't abide by the deal? They usually don't, but they're in a lot weaker position today if they break it. And what does that mean? Well, if they break it again and America have people in the neighborhood, aircraft carriers and weapons, after the midterms, Trump could hit them again. Israel could be green-lighted to hit them again. And that's the dynamic that's different. Iran is much, meaning the dictators, have much less military power today. If they act good, there's a chance of that. Low, but if they act good, maybe they join the rest of the world. But if once again they don't, they've been bombed backwards and they can be bombed again. In the meantime, the Republicans might hold on to the House and the United States will be better for it. This isn't a great outcome. There's something about foreign policy people in America need to understand. A couple of basic items. One, the world still has barbarians. I'll say it again. There's still barbarians out there. The Iranian dictators are barbarians. What they do to women and their own people is beyond barbaric. They still exist. Not everyone is just going to play nice. Foreign policy isn't fixed by the end of the nightly news. It is a retracted long-term issue. And Iran's not going to be solved in a day, a month, or two. When it comes to foreign policy, the less said, the better. You can't argue foreign policy in the media. You shouldn't have too many people talking about your foreign policy. There's a New York Post article that, The silence over 4 days of the deals was very wrong. Really? Kissinger spent 4 years negotiating in secret to end Vietnam, and we can't abide by 4 days? And you wonder why it's hard for Trump or anyone else to be successful on the world stage when there's nothing but critics in America? Anyway, at the end of the day, we are safer because of this war than we were before it. For how long? Only time will tell. But I'm certainly not going to put my trust in the Democrats from DC that were not willing to do anything when it comes to the dangers of Iran and who left our borders open to potential terrorists. And that's my opening statement. We'll be right back with more of Politics in Perspective. Hey everyone, welcome back to Politics in Perspective. So, California's in the news, and it's probably not going to go away from being in the news for a while. They're still counting votes, and I have I'm not going to say a protege of mine, but someone I've known since his teenage years, and I worked with him at the beginning of his career, and he did something pretty exclusive and groundbreaking within LA. But before we get to that, how bad is California? Well, let's watch this clip from CNN. Yeah, CNN, about how bad California is.
Here's my take. At a time when President Trump and Republicans are faring poorly in most polls, the story has been different in California. Republican Steve Hilton finished ahead of many high-spending Democrats in the governor's race to advance to the November election, facing Democrat Javier Becerra. In Los Angeles, an overwhelmingly Democratic city, Spencer Pratt, a Republican former reality television personality, looked as if he might make the mayoral general election before finishing third. California Democrats will be tempted to dismiss all this as a sideshow, but the frustration is real and justified. California is one of the most dynamic places on the planet. It has Silicon Valley, Hollywood, world-class universities, extraordinary agriculture, ports, talent, and natural beauty. But it is a case study in how a rich society can spend more and more while producing less and less of what its ordinary citizens need.
Okay, think about that. Think about what Zakaria just said. That the Democrats would dismiss this as a sideshow, but it's a case study in what goes wrong. So here I want to bring in my longtime friend. I don't know how old he is now, but it's been a long time. Christian, great to have you on the show. How old were you when we met?
Well, and I was going to say, you can say protege because you were actually, I was 18 years old. I just turned 18. I was still in high school, and I had written an article. It was just after the 2004 election. So therein lies the answer to how old I am. And I had written a piece for my school newspaper, and I think my aunt, Mary Lou Wagenman, who knew you, she sent it to you, and then you reached out to me and asked if you could put it on the web on politicalvanguard.com, which was your website at the time. And that was the very first time that any of my work got web presence. That was my
wow.
into
22 years ago. All right, you're making me feel old. You still look great. You've gone on to do some very interesting things. You were at the beginning of Project Veritas. You were at the beginning with me, Andrew Breitbart. You associated with. People don't know that Andrew Breitbart's first public appearances were at my request and events that I did. He was not in the public in the face. He was behind the scenes.
Mm.
And I worked with him early on, and you did as well. And you went undercover for Project Veritas. Why don't you just tell people what that was like? Because Breitbart was doing undercover, you were on. This was like a new thing on the right. Tell us a little bit about that experience for you way back when, and then we got to bring you to present,
Sure.
where you went undercover again.
Well, it was very serendipitous because it was in 2009, and for totally different reasons, I met around the same time. I met Andrew Breitbart on the one hand through Friends of Abe, which was a secret society in Los Angeles for freedom-minded professionals in the entertainment industry. And Evan Sayet, the talented writer, he brought me into Friends of Abe, and then I met Andrew Breitbart that way. And at the same time, totally coincidentally, a mutual acquaintance had sent James O'Keefe a trailer for my thesis film, Sycophant, and James was very impressed, reached out to me and asked if I would do some production work for him, because he was very impressed with the production value. So I started working with James O'Keefe. He was putting together the Acorn videos. If to viewers who recall the Acorn, it was the Reservoir Dogs of the conservative media movement. It was the very first, the Citizen Kane, the first undercover video that put both Project Veritas on the map and also Andrew Breitbart on the map.
Stop real quick there. This was way back when Acorn was funding the voter registration and all this stuff. And it was a big movement. And I remember Andrew coming to me saying, I'm going to take it down. Or he didn't come to me. We were at the same location. And I at the time, I was like, how is this ever going to be brought down? And Andrew said to me, I'm going to bring it down. And he did. So go on.
Yeah, and so James and I started having conversations on the phone. This is like early 2009. It was before the name James O'Keefe was Googleable. It was before Breitbart was really, a household name. And he was telling me he had this idea to go into Acorn offices, posing as a pimp with a prostitute, to see if they would give tax advice to set up a brothel for 14-year-old El Salvadoran sex slaves. And sure enough, they did. They said, oh, yeah, you want to list those as dependents. And don't say prostitution, say performing arts. Anyway, it was a classic. It broke through the Democrat media complex in such a way that even Jon Stewart was featuring it on The Daily Show and taking the side of Project Veritas, of taking the side of Breitbart. And anyway, so that was a big breakthrough, and I played a small role in that. I shot some B-roll of Hannah Giles pretending to be a prostitute on Huntington Beach, and and then so I continued to work with James at Veritas, and also Andrew Breitbart took me under his wing, and I started doing some independent journalism for him. I worked with him until he died. I was the last to see him in the office the night he died, and then after continued to do investigations with Project Veritas. So my biggest work was in the 2016 election. I got the Clinton campaign telling me, the dark operatives of the Clinton campaign telling me about how they're inserting and training bird doggers into Trump rallies to incite violence. That made the front page of the New York Times. Got Google executives telling me about how they're manipulating algorithms to throw the 2020 election. Got Van Jones.
By the way, ever since that, I have been telling people not to use Google, and that Google is one of the worst offenders. And I know I told you at the time how incredibly proud of you that I was, that you were willing to stick your neck out and take on these big roles. Sorry to cut you off, but that was the seminal moment that you helped create.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was 2019, and it was kind of before, it was Project Veritas that is the reason we know the term shadow banning. It was some of my colleagues who exposed that Facebook at the time, that operatives were using a term of art called shadow banning, which was to ban people without them knowing that they were banned, or to mute people's accounts without them knowing. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on in big tech. A lot of this knowledge we take for granted. Of course, a lot of things have been cleaned up in big tech in Silicon Valley in the last 2 years. But it was Project Veritas that was at the forefront of exposing how Google, Facebook, Twitter were creating this alternate reality in the image of the way the leftists saw the world and wanted us to see the world. So yeah,
it was amazing. By the way, we had Evan Sayed on just last month. Yeah, last month.
I haven't seen it. Ever since he moved to Vegas, I barely ever see him.
Yes, but okay. So you bring up an interesting point. He escaped California, but you're still living in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. Burbank.
So I get asked all the time, what is LA really like? Well, you know better than I do what LA is really like, not just because you live there, but you recently did it. So how bad is Bass done as mayor of LA? What's it like on the streets? I had a show in San Francisco that I used to do, and on break, you walk through and you literally did walk over needles or whatever. So what about you? Tell people what it's really like.
Well, I've lost a lot of friends as in a lot of my friends have moved to, Nevada or Arizona or Texas or Tennessee or Florida. And that's, it's not by coincidence. You can see in the video, how awful, in third world, like the conditions are on Skid Row. Skid Row has always been terrible, but Mayor Bass, she said she was going to clean this up. She said she was going to solve the homeless crisis. It's a pretty accurate paraphrase that she had very lofty promises that she made and that she has clearly fallen short of. But I think a lot of these things are by design. I don't think that the left has ever actually wanted to solve these problems. I think they thrive. Look at how, as we'll talk about, how they're exploiting these problems. In one of the interviews that I did on Skid Row, I asked why when the guy was telling me this is professional fraud, these people come into town all the time, and I asked why do you think they target you guys? Why do they come here? And essentially the answer was they can get away with it. You can get away with anything here. Crime is rampant and law enforcement is non-existent here. So you can do a lot of things in the dark on Skid Row that you couldn't so much get away with in broad daylight. So, the left, I think, engineers, you can go back to the Cloward Piven strategy, which Andrew talks a lot about, of course, which is, get as many people on entitlement as possible so that it'll create a culture of entitlement. And ultimately, when the system collapses, people will be so inured to government aid that they'll want to replace the system with communism. So you can get theoretical, philosophical about it as well, but very practically, the Democrats have had every opportunity after opportunity continuously to do something about these problems, and they don't. They make them worse, and we're beginning to see perhaps why, because these situations, these living conditions, these ghettos that they have created are exploitable. We saw in 2020 where were some of the in Georgia, in Philadelphia, in those places where there was the highest levels of election irregularities.
Nice word.
Yeah. It's dangerous combining those two words, but it's dangerous to talk about this in general, or at least it was in taking it full circle to big tech censorship. It was a lot more dangerous to talk about this stuff 5 years ago than it is now, fortunately. But it was in these urban, these urban ghettoized environments that a lot of the swindling was taking place. A lot of the ballot stuffing and the strange briefcases. A lot of this stuff is done. They go
and strange results. In 2020, I went over all of the on election night the history of the performance in Wisconsin and Michigan, and I compared it. And take just Milwaukee. Milwaukee had a average history of 62%. Milwaukee County, 62% turnout. They had a high once of 69, and in 2020 they had a high 80s turnout. Okay, so and I know you saw similar things. But we're already halfway done with you. We haven't gotten to what's really important of what you've been doing lately. And there's two things that you have focused on: fraud in California when it comes to entitlements, and fraud with respect to voting. So which you want to start with? I want to start with you with the fraud and the entitlement. So tell us what you did or what you found in that regard.
Well, there's a reason why I went specifically where I went. So the California Post had reported on the Midnight Mission in Skid Row, which there were 1,160 voter registrations tied to that building. And that building only has 120 beds. 120 beds, I think 84 beds for men, 36 beds for women, according to its website, and 1,160 voter registrations. So that was interesting. And there was also a similar situation in Venice, where the St. Joseph Center, where there were 185 registered voters tied to that address. Curiously, that very St. Joseph Center received a $600,000 taxpayer-funded grant by Nithya Raman while she was chairing the city council's housing and homelessness committee. And great work she did on that committee, and $2.5 million in unrecovered advances from the federal government, according to HUD. And the CEO of LASA, which is behind a lot of this stuff, Valencia Adams Kellum, she was running the St. Joseph Center. So this is not an anomaly. It's not just this Midnight Mission on Skid Row. There's multiple places, many homeless shelters throughout Los Angeles, where there's these bulks of voter registration. So I just want to go there because I can't go to all of them, but I started there and thought I'd poke around. I tried to go into the mission. They did not. They didn't. They immediately said you can't record in here, and no one. There was no one there to talk to me. No one was willing to talk to me. So I thought I'd poke around outside, just circle the block. All those people that talked to me and told me about people coming to town, paying people to vote with cigarettes and cash, were all in the same block. I was not scouring all of Skid Row, hunting people down. That was all just on one block, just walking around.
All right, so you've given us some video feed. This is you taken. How long ago did you do this?
This was exactly 1 week ago. This was on Friday.
All right, and you just show up, and so let's just play it, and then afterwards, you can explain more of it.
They were paying $5 to register the vote.
Were they telling people who to vote for?
Absolutely.
And who are these people?
I'm not sure. They had these papers, and they were they're asking you if you're registered to vote, you could sign. They give you $2 or something. A cigarette.
They were offering $2 a cigarette.
If you sign, if you're registered to vote.
How often have you seen this happen?
I've seen it happen about 30 times.
30 times?
Yes. So that means they'll be back to do it.
Professional fraud.
Yeah. Have you seen this happen?
Yes.
All right. So those are just a couple people you spoke to. So you just, first of all, tell people where Skid Row is.
It's in downtown Los Angeles. It's in if you go to, geographically, it's in downtown Los Angeles. It's a few.
All right, downtown LA,
Pershing Square, yeah.
And this is the same thing that I talked about with respect to Milwaukee. And so here's where the opportunity for the crime is, because you don't need voter ID to sign up, and you don't need voter ID to turn in ballots.
Mhm.
So they go to these people and they offer them money or cigarettes for registration. And then, as you explain it, all these ballots come, over 1,000 ballots come to one building where 100 people were supposedly. And then what happens?
And they're mostly for Nithya Raman. And as that woman was telling me, it was these people were specifically coming to on behalf of Nithya Raman, whether it was directly on her behalf, but as we all saw in the days after the election, Nithya Raman, who was, dwindling third place, had essentially conceded on election night, didn't even pick up her own district,
Right?
surged to second place. The same thing we saw in Wisconsin in 2020. Very similar things that we saw in this late night, this post-election, the days following this surge, and it was. And you would think that there would be, it would be equally apportioned. There'd be some Spencer Pratt. If these were actually ballots coming in after the election, they were legitimate ballots. They would follow probably some of the trends, where you'd see a lot of mostly Bass ballots. You'd see at least some Spencer Pratt ballots. It was almost monolithically for Nithya Raman, and they expect us to just think that that's normal.
Okay, I do want to give people some context. I just asked you for a short clip. Where can they find the full clip of what you did?
So you can go to my X account, Chris_Hartsock. You can also go to Project Veritas, where they're featuring it on their X. You could go to projectveritas.com, the YouTube, and you can go to you see it on my Instagram, Christian Hartsock, Facebook. So we're pushing it out, on all our social platforms. I'm pushing it on mine, Project Veritas, on theirs. So, but yeah.
But this isn't the only thing related to fraud in LA. Talk about, previous to this, you went and did something similar with respect to all of the fraud that related to. Why don't you explain that as well?
Yeah, so it was, and this was for the California Courier. This was a couple months ago, where I went to these hospices in another part of LA, where in Van Nuys and North Hollywood, and it had been reported there were 31% of the nation's hospice and home care companies in the U.S. are registered in LA County, but even though only 2% of the elderly population is in LA County. And so I went to all these, there was hundreds, in some cases, hundreds, or at least up to 100, almost 100 hospice care and home care centers registered to one building. And there's a few buildings in Van Nuys and North Hollywood that are like this, where they have, these marvels of architectural impossibility, where you have hundreds of hundreds of hospices registered to one building. So I thought I'd go and I'd knock on some doors. Almost every single one of them had out to lunch. It was like 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and there were so many out to lunch signs. One even was a laminated, finely printed, taped to the door, very permanent looking out to lunch sign. And I was like, must be a very hungry, population that gravitates towards this industry. But and then no one would talk to me. One woman just said, "Oh no, my manager's not here. I can't talk to you." Shooed me out. Most people weren't even any people there. One guy almost got into a fight with me. This guy ran an auto body repair shop on the second floor of an office building, and he got very hostile with me. and tried to call the cops while he was trying to falsely imprison me and prevent me from leaving. That was very interesting. And that you can check out on the California Courier website and socials. But yeah, and this this is something that the LA Times reported on in 2020, where there's widespread hospice fraud, which prompted the state to introduce emergency hospice regulations that were supposed to take effect this year. But the deadline came and gone, and Newsom hasn't done anything about it. He's bragged that he's revoked 280 licenses, but that's about maybe the number of hospices on one floor of one building that I went to. So another case of Newsom doing absolutely nothing about widespread fraud. And
but stop right there before you go. So in 2020, LA Times reports this. Mm-hmm. These supposed regulations come in. It's 2026, 6 years later, and you're talking about 286 licenses, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And he, did his little victory dance. Nothing to see here. Making fun of people who want to look into it. And the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services haven't identified $3.5 billion in Medi-Cal fraud in LA County. There have been 2,100 complaints from 10 years ago, January 2015 to August 2021, about hospice fraud, and it's something that Democrats do not want to do anything about. And if you bring it up, they get very hostile towards you. It's very strange, whether it's hospice fraud, medical fraud, whether it's voter fraud. There's no type of fraud that they aren't extremely defensive about.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So in the remaining time we have left, what effect in your mind, I mean, you're an LA resident, what effect did Spencer Pratt have on this election, and what good will come out of it in your mind?
Well, I think that a lot of people who are smart enough and bold enough to not follow the talking points being given to them by the Democrat media complex. I think enough people saw what happened, how brazen. Look, Democrats are the advantage we have is that in this state is that the Democrats are so cozy, so comfortable here that they think that they can get away with anything, and they can. I mean, look at the behested payments and the essential legalized extortion that the Newsoms have been involved in. Going back to his time as lieutenant governor. Fraud, this kind of fraud, they are so brazen and so obnoxiously in your face about what they can get away with, what they do get away with. It's almost like they want to taunt us about how much they can get away with it. But perhaps there's going to be an Icarus moment where they insult too many people's intelligence at once. And I think that perhaps a lot of people, are willing to believe their lying eyes and ears and see what actually happened. This doesn't make sense. How did Nithya Raman amass all these magical ballots, in the weeks following the election? I think that it's almost an advantage in California that Democrats are becoming so brazen. There's going to be a threshold where enough people wake up and say, okay, wait a second. Why are we putting up with this? Why are we letting them get away with this? Why are we? But the thing is, we have to stay here and fight. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here for at least the foreseeable future. And I think we got it. But we've got to stop leaving the state, thinking that these problems aren't going to follow us. Democrats have their designs on Florida. Believe me, they have their designs on Tennessee. It's not like you can escape yourself. Like in Paranormal Activity, just leaving the house isn't going to stop the demons from following you. So we got to stay here and contain. California is the Wuhan lab of American cities. We need to contain the virus at its source and stay here and fight. And I think That's the answer to this. And I think enough people saw what happened in the weeks following the election, the mayoral race, as a microcosm of the rampant culture of corruption that defines California, that if enough of us stick here and fight, then perhaps something can be done.
Okay, well, you're loosely associated with Hollywood. They had the number of, I think the number of shooting days almost fell by 50% between 2024 and today. So what's the feeling there that you've been able to gather?
Well, that, runaway productions, that is something that many in Hollywood have been bemoaning for as long as I've been in LA. And there's a whole movement, shoot in LA, rather than, how about we vote differently? How about we stop electing the people who make it impossible to shoot in LA? How about we stop voting for the same people, fundraising for the same people that are making it expensive, inordinately expensive, not just to live in LA, but certainly to shoot in LA. Because it shouldn't be that way. There's a reason why the film industry was birthed in LA. It's because of the unique weather conditions, the unique there's a reason why Edison had his patent on the East Coast, and he was able to be given a run for his money by starting this industry in Los Angeles, because there's no place climatologically like it on the planet, and there's so many advantages just in very nature to shooting in LA. And now all of those have been uprooted by the costliness that Democrats have, but this uniparty oligarchy has perpetuated and perpetrated on the state. There's no reason for it. So hopefully we're at the point where people say, maybe we need to stop just telling people shoot in LA. How about vote differently? Clean up Sacramento, and make it advantageous, because it's naturally advantageous to shoot in LA. That's why the industry was started here. And but it's unnaturally impossible too. So we need to uproot these unnatural reasons why, disincentives, which don't need to be there, and stop having to compete with Georgia and Canada and Austin, and re-incentivize making movies in Hollywood, having Hollywood in Hollywood. And that's something that Spencer Pratt did talk about on his campaign, and hopefully enough people heard and at least silently acknowledged that he was onto something.
Okay, Christian, I appreciate you coming on and explaining some of these things. I hope people will follow you. Why don't you tell them give them your best, here, we'll bring it up. There you are on X. You know what, I am so proud of the decades of what you have done and the things that you have brought to reality. It's been amazing to watch you grow. I really appreciate it, and keep it up. There's nothing like sunlight to expose things, and you've taken great risks, and I can't tell you how proud of you that I am. Folks, that's all the time we have on this segment of Politics in Perspective. We'll be right back, and thanks so much, and make sure you share this and sign up to see this regularly. Thanks again. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that segment. I don't mean to lean on California too much as a storyline, but it keeps pushing itself in the news. And so it matters, because if you think of the American power structure over the last, I don't know how many years, Pelosi, McCarthy, Newsom, it's they're big on the national stage, and we got to keep track of what's going on in California in case, God forbid, it really does come back into power in the White House. Okay, political roundup. We saw this poll out this week. Proud, extremely proud to be an American. And you see the GOP for the last 25 years is 90% of them, of GOPers, are proud to be American. But the Democrats have fallen from 85% to 29%. There's a lot of talk about what's going on there. There's the usual on the left. Oh, Donald Trump's really bad. This is why this has happened. I will admit that Donald Trump has excited them in the wrong direction. But it is wrong to think that moving from 85 to 29% is about Donald Trump. So let's dig into this just a little bit. And I want to take you to a Gallup poll, because the notion that it was Trump that caused this is just false. So if we bring up the poll that this is based on, and what you see here, I know it's a little bit small, but by the way, this is Gallup's poll, so you can go to Gallup, but this isn't all Gallup. I added the names Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, and the arrows. And what I wanted to point out was, of course, the Democrats are in blue, is, and I got this idea from people blaming Trump for all of this with the Democrats. But, you know, I wrote a book, The Lessons of the American Civilization, that talks about this in significant degree. But this latest poll, I want to emphasize what is going on here. So in 2001, remember that poll's 2001 to 2026, you see the Republicans basically flatline. Started at 90, ended up at 92, or just below 90. Now, the Democrats' first big dip occurs during the Bush administration. They started in the high 80s and they dipped to the low 70s. Now, Bush and Obama and Trump could not be more different as human beings. Bush was mild-mannered compared to Trump. And by the way, some Republicans think that's a problem, that Bush wasn't willing to fight. But Bush was not an acerbic human being. He didn't mean tweet. He didn't go on social media and rip people, okay? So you need to keep that in mind. His personality wasn't harsh. You also need to keep in mind that they demonized him towards the end. There was, of course, the bank failure, and they jumped on him for that wrongly, by the way. That's a different story and another long discussion. But the point being here that the relatively moderate Republican Bush, with a soft personality compared to Trump, the Democrats still, their approval or their patriotism took a big drop under him. It revived under Obama, but it did not revive to its prior height than Bush. So what am I getting at here? The trend started in the 2000. This large trend started this century. So it did go back up under Obama, but note what I put in there. If you look at this chart, it started a fast dip in the second administration of Obama. And if you look at it, that it goes down and you see that first hitch, that's 2015. Those are Obama years. Now Trump gets in. You have the Russia was pushed by the media and the Democrats, and it goes down. But it's important to note when Biden gets in, it doesn't go back that high. It stays in the 60s. And even dipped for a while under Biden. So why did it only go to the 60s instead of back to the high 80s? We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the second Trump term, it goes down again. But the main point here is the fall started before Trump. In fact, it started 2 presidents before him. It continued under a Democrat president, and it didn't revive much under Joe Biden. So why are the Democrats so down on America? Why do they have disdain for America? Well, let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about the reasons. It's a combination of things. It is not all President Trump. So, The Divided Era, that's the book I wrote. We are, since the Clinton administration, in a very divisive period, and the division is growing. And as a result of that, the 2 parties are at loggerheads, and they fight intensely. For the Democrats, they equate that fight with whether they like the country or not. And that's a very important point. They think the Republicans party is now the party that stands for the wrong things. And so when they are out of power, they believe the country is in jeopardy. And therefore, they don't like the country as much. So let me say that again, very important. Within this divided era, the Democrats believe that the Republicans, when they are in power, are bad and do bad things and lead the country in a bad way. And therefore, they don't like the country. The Democrats do not stand by the Constitution, do not stand by American exceptionalism. And that has fostered this disdain by number 2, the media. The media of this last 25 years, this quarter century, is very acerbic towards America and towards Republicans. So the Democrat is, real quick, we have a divided era in media. We have 2 medias, basically. The left of center and everything else. And they fuel this disdain for America. And the Democrats who watch that left media gather steam from that. Number 3, the American education system. It turns out that among those of Democrats who dislike the country the most are Gen Zs. And this is an important dynamic which didn't exist in the 1950s, but has been growing intensely for the last 50 years, which is that our American educational system has disdain for America. It preaches things like the 1619 Project. It teaches our youth to disdain our civilization as unexceptional and bad, even though compared to the rest of history, it is exceptional. And so this drop in this quarter century as media gains power is also attributed to the fact that our educational system teaches our children to hate our culture. And finally, American decline. And if we can bring up the next quote that I have from my book. At the beginning of a civilization, a people will do anything to survive. At the end, they will apologize for doing it. What do I mean by that? Now, I mean, this is the royal we, because not everybody in America apologizes for America. But during the Obama administration, it hit its height where he did an apology tour. He said, America has done many wrong things. And he did it to dictators and others. He did it in Europe, which is now cracking down on freedom in unprecedented levels by jailing people who say things on social media. Britain's actually jailing someone who shot a gun in America. He put it on the media, social media, and got arrested when he went home. So America did an amazing thing in founding this country against enormous odds and dangers. They fought to create the best civilization in history when it comes to freedom and prosperity. And now we are born in this faith of our mission, and civilizations decline in the doubt. And the Democrats are the skeptics and the party of doubt who do not appreciate the success of America. And so, when you go back to this poll and you find that Democrats don't support America, yes, they are particularly focused today on President Trump. But in fact, this is a longer term dynamic brought on by the divided era, fueled by the media, fueled by an educational system that teaches children to disdain their own world. And it is part of a larger American decline. And it will take important and sustained leadership and the recovery of our education system to undo. Well, that's Politics in Perspective for this week. Sorry to end on such a hard note, but that's the challenge to renew our civilization. Hope you'll join me on Substack, tomdell.com, to get my latest. And also, you can go to Political Vanguard to get not only the news of the day that I think is important that we put out each morning, but also a full listing of all these podcasts. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. Thanks so much for joining us.